Thank you everybody for joining on this exciting discussion on how employee benefits can drive positive environmental impacts. So I'm Cameron. I'm thrilled to welcome you all to our webinar, Perks of Purpose, How Employee Benefits Can Save the Planet. So as businesses, we find ourselves at a unique moment in time. Employees and consumers are increasingly conscious of sustainability, seeking out ways to reduce their carbon footprint, embrace eco-friendly practices, and align actions with their values. This shift has given companies an opportunity, an imperative really, not only to meet needs of their workforce, but also to take meaningful steps towards environmental responsibility. Employee benefits in this context have evolved from simply being perks to becoming powerful tools for change, which is something we're going to be discussing in quite a lot of detail today. So we'll be focusing on how impact-driven schemes can create lasting value, not only for individual employees, but for the environment as well. It's no longer about providing traditional benefits like healthcare or pensions. The demand for benefits that have a broader purpose is absolutely growing, and forward-thinking businesses are recognizing this. So we're really fortunate today to have three incredible companies join us here, each bringing a unique perspective on how sustainability and employee benefits can intersect to create a meaningful change. So to begin with, we have CycleSaver, offers a cycle to work scheme that promote healthier lifestyles and reduce carbon emissions. The electric car scheme, where I work, is helping employees transition to electric vehicles. And we're also joined by GoodPAYE, focusing on financial well-being, linking the impact of how we manage money to sustainable, ethical choices. These businesses really do represent what we mean by perks with purpose. They're not just providing employee benefits, they're helping create a culture where sustainability is at the heart of company values. So in today's session, in our conversation, we will explore key topics like real-world impact of these benefit schemes, the role that businesses can play in advancing sustainability goals, and of course, how offering the right perks can make sustainability a natural part of company culture. So just a little housekeeping before we do begin or formally begin. I did mention this, but for anyone who's joined the meeting, if you don't mind keeping your microphones on mute during the session, that'd be fantastic. We'll have plenty of time at the end for a bit of a Q&A. So please submit your questions in the chat throughout this webinar, and we'll have plenty of time at the end to come back on to them. I'll keep an eye out for any questions that come through. So before we dive into our first question, I'd love to invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their companies and the impact that they're making. So we're joined by Dino, Tony, and Tom. We'll start in order. Dino, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the business you're building.
Perfect. Thanks, Cam. Much appreciated. So I'm Dino Bertolis, the founder of CycleSaver. It was founded last year, so all quite recent. And what we essentially do is provide salary sacrifice subscriptions for bike sharing schemes. Now, the term bike share is not too well known. When I say bike share, I'm referring to these new bicycle providers like Lime, Boris Bikes, which has been around for a while, Beryl, Forest, sort of the ability to go to a bike on the street, pick it up and go from A to B. That's bike share. And what we noticed is that these schemes were becoming hugely popular in many cities around the UK. And the costs of them actually can fall under the cycle to work regulations. So off we went to go find a cycle to work scheme that offered benefits for these bike share providers, couldn't find one, and thought this is a huge gap in the market, that everyone's spending a lot of money on these bikes, and they could be saving up to 47% under the cycle to work regulations. So that was sort of the launch of CycleSaver, and we've partnered with every major bike sharing scheme across the UK. And yeah, we're allowing employees to save up to 47% on these costs, but importantly, at the same time, allowing companies to encourage a healthier and more sustainable commute.
Fantastic. Over to you, Tony.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tony Karolambides, Chief Exec at GoodPAYE. We are the country's first 100% charity-owned professional fundraising organisation, and we're a mission-driven organisation who want to transform giving at work by making payroll giving accessible to every employee across the UK. For those of you that don't know, payroll giving is the most tax efficient way for any individual to give to charity. And our platform enables individuals to give to any UK registered charity of their choosing in a way which is going to drive the most impact in terms of bang for their buck, in terms of the money that they donate. We've been going about 3.5 years. We've got the backing of 5 of the UK's most established charities. So our shareholders are Barnardo's, Crisis, Royal National Institute for the Blind, Royal British Legion and WaterAid. And we've been on a really successful journey in the last few years. We currently work with just under 250 corporations and 250 charities. And that list is growing every week as we kind of look to drive social impact through our program.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining. And last but not least, Tom from the Electric Car Scheme.
Thanks, Cameron. Thanks, Tony. Cameron, I don't like the picture. Terrible picture you've chosen there. Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Alon, founder of the Electric Car Scheme. We started the business about 4 years ago with the aim of getting everyone in the country access to electric cars as affordable as possible. And the government make it available that you can salary sacrifice for electric cars. So we wanted to go and find the best rates for electric cars and then allow employees to pay for that through their gross salary. We want to make it easy and obvious to do, and that means taking all the pain away from businesses administering it. So it's no cost and no risk to the business to offer it, hopefully a no-brainer, and therefore employees can get access. That's gone well over the last 4 years. We've grown nicely. We have a bit more than 1,000 employers using it, and look to expand in the types of savings and affordability that we can give across net zero benefits is our future.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone, for the introductions. I think that leads us quite nicely onto the first question for this discussion. So let me go on to the next screen. So I'll pose a question and I'll pick somebody at random to answer first, but should businesses need to lead social and environmental change, and can they? Perhaps Tony, do you want to kickstart on that topic?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the short answer is, in an ideal world, businesses shouldn't need to lead social environmental change at all. And there wouldn't be any need for charities at all. But in the real world, absolutely, businesses and individuals and governments need to lead social and environmental change. And I think everyone needs to kind of play a role in that. I think it's been massively encouraging in the last 10 to 20 years to see businesses take more responsibility and actually, rather than paying lip service, properly commit to, I guess, measurable outcomes and being able to demonstrate kind of social and environmental impact. I think that's a really positive shift, but I still think we're quite early on in that journey, and there's still an enormous amount to do. I think from our side, because we're 100% charity owned and we're a mission driven organization, we're very, we're firm believers in the need for business to drive this change. And I think, given that we're the first ever business in the UK to be owned by multiple charities, it's a really interesting model for civil society to have in terms of building businesses that help drive social and environmental change. But the flip side to that is that the market itself has created lots of businesses in this space, such as Electric Car Scheme and CycleSaver and many others. And I think that's a really positive shift in the last few years. So that would be my initial thoughts.
Yeah, fantastic. Couldn't agree more. And I guess looping quite nicely on from that, Tom, what's your thoughts on this question, having built the Electric Car Scheme?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting and quite difficult question. Should they need to lead it? I don't think it's a business's primary job to lead this, but because business accounts for so much of the economy, people's time, number of people, tens of millions of people in work, it can play a huge role by effectively being incentivized to promote positive change or positive behaviors. And that it is a really interesting tool to allow the government to say, okay, let this be eligible or enabled to allow businesses to engage in something positive. And I think you get some businesses who are very mission driven and focused and for all good intentions will push this stuff at their own cost, but the majority won't. And then you've got some structures to allow businesses to engage in this positive behaviors for free. So this is the kind of space we work in. Hey, if it's free and easy for the business to do, why wouldn't you do it? Give this type of benefits to your employees and shift behavior. And I think that's kind of the phase we're in. There's a few different aspects of the tax structure and employment structure that allows these really beneficial behaviors to have a financial advantage. I think the next stage that becomes even more interesting is where businesses are financially incentivized to drive some of these behaviors. And it's really just a scale of how active they're going to be. For instance, if you made corporation tax dependent on your CO2 emissions, right? We would see radical changes because the numbers move the mindset of most businesses set up to do that. And I think that works. So while I don't think it is the responsibility of business to do this, I think it's a really interesting mechanism to drive very large change.
Amazing. And on a similar topic, driving sustainability, Dino, how would you like to respond to this question?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We have a diverse range of businesses that we engage with, and I mean, given that our scheme and the others on this call, it's for free. There's sort of no downside when most people join, and it's not really a conversation because there's no heavy investment in any of these schemes. But many of the businesses are just environmentally conscious. They want to do the right thing, provide the right benefits to employees. What is interesting is that there's a small percentage, unfortunately, that they're driven by other factors, and that it may be for the right reasons. Maybe they're struggling with their profitability, funding, etc. But the read I get on the market is it's hard to attract talent if you actually don't shout about what good you're doing as a company and how you care about sustainability. And I think as time goes on, for companies who don't invest in this, it's becoming increasingly harder to get top talent. So, I mean, this is sort of, I think, where it's become a nice to have to invest in these initiatives. Now it's become essential for survival because you got to get fresh talent coming into the company and supporting the business for decades to come. So I just think that's quite an interesting dynamic at play here.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think that's quite, sorry. So I think that's a really interesting point because I think businesses are actually increasingly becoming a vehicle to drive social and environmental change that the employees at those businesses demand and want and properly engage with, right? So in terms of recruitment and retention of top talent, increasingly businesses have to do this in order to bring people on, and increasingly the people that want to join those businesses demand more. So it's a kind of virtuous circle, and it's kind of pushing things in the right direction across the board.
Fantastic. Thank you everyone for responding to that question. I think that's such a great start. Conscious of time, I'm going to move quite swiftly on to our second discussion point today. And I'll propose the question, should the government be doing more to make good initiatives accessible for all? I'd like to start with Tom on this one, if you don't mind. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think the primary job of the government is to find failures in the society or the markets and apply law or incentives to correct, right, to govern. I don't think it's their job to create schemes or directly engage in benefits, let's say, because government execution of massive projects is really difficult and generally fails, right? So I think that's best left to the charity or public or private sector to execute. But they can drive enormous change by making quite small changes. So if you think, okay, pensions people don't save enough for their future. So, okay, the government's going to mandate you must save for your future, and we will mandate that your employer does that on your behalf, and you can't go get the money until you're 60, right? And mass change, and it's completely normal now, and no one really thinks about it too much. And aspects like that can have really big impacts. I'm sure the government didn't expect the whole salary sacrifice for car industry to blow up in the early 2000s when they kind of opened benefit in kind, and they were just trying to make it easy for company cars. But hey, presto, there's an innovation, and that drives a lot of change. I would like to see them do a lot more directional kind of policy change to allow businesses to develop good initiatives, as you put it. I don't think it would take too much. They're creeping towards it, and things like the obligation to create gender pay reports, the obligation to create CO2 reports, and you can see how that builds and how that can be like directed in the future. But I'd love to see things like corporation tax dependent on emissions and things like that. And I think we'd get much more innovation with that kind of incentive.
Brilliant. And leading quite nicely on from that, I'd love to hear your angle, Dino, on with CycleSaver on this question.
Yeah, listen, I completely agree with Tom. I'd love to see that sort of business focus around emissions, sustainability, and just doing good in general. I mean, I would love for the government to be doing more, but with my cycling hats on, the government's investing a lot of money into making cycling safer, dedicated cycle lanes, investing in bike share programs in many cities and towns across the UK. There's the salary sacrifice that allows employees to save 47% on these things, whether you own a bike or you just use these bike sharing schemes. So overall, there's some great incentives and investments in place from the government. But I mean, I'm with Tom, where it's sort of like it'd be good to get more information and incentives from a business perspective.
Absolutely. Tony, any thoughts?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So payroll giving is a government-backed tax initiative, right? And it was set up in 1987 to try and encourage tax-efficient giving to charity and getting more people to donate to charity. And the government's got to be applauded for bringing that in. However, like 35, 40 years later, still less than 4% of people give through payroll giving, and very few people are aware of it or have the ability to give because businesses aren't taking it up. Now, if you compare that to the 31% of the population that give by direct debit, and if you give by direct debit, the charity generally benefits from gift aid, which is 25%. With payroll giving, if you're a high rate taxpayer, the charity would get 45% on every pound that you pay. So if you were just to flip the 31% giving by direct debit to the 4% with payroll giving, at no additional cost to the donor, we're talking about hundreds of millions of extra pounds for civil society. So for me, like, the government have set up lots of really good initiatives, but I think the pension point is a really good example where they've made it mandatory. And for us, like, in terms of driving social change and social impact, we are calling on the government now through various sector groups to make payroll giving mandatory for businesses of a certain size. And that's to make it mandatory in terms of offering the benefit to employees. It's not saying people have to give, it's giving them the choice, but it's actually saying to businesses, you need to make this benefit available to your employees. And if that was to happen overnight, I think it would be hundreds of millions of pounds extra for charity every single year, which is huge. Like, the social impact of that is enormous, right? So, as I said, big support for what the government have done, but they can 100% be doing more, and it doesn't need to be that complicated. I guess the key thing then is to ensure that the infrastructure exists to deliver on that. And I think that, that's up for the market to kind of ensure is in place when the changes do come in.
Thank you very much. I think that's a super powerful message and something I've definitely taken away from that. So thank you very much, Tony. Conscious of time, we've got 4 minutes for each question now. So quite sharp responsive, if that's okay. But should businesses support their employees in making more sustainable choices, and can they? Dino, over to you.
The answer is Yes, of course they can, and yes, they should. It's just quite simply a good starting point is things that I know that the challenge is always budget in these conversations, and I come from a point where a bit prior to CycleSaver, I was in the sustainability space, and I was speaking to HR professionals, and our service was about measurement and reduction of emissions, and we charged a price, and things always fell apart when it came to sort of budgets and how to get them accepted. So as a starting point, I mean, the salary sacrifice schemes are a no-brainer. You just got to implement them and go ahead with them. That's as far as I'm concerned. But then as time goes on, I think you need to, it's very much a cultural thing in the organization, because I've seen far too many times competitions, initiatives where people do good and they try to get people to be more sustainable or healthy, whatever that initiative may be. And it fails if it's actually not authentic and part of the culture. So I would say it very much starts at that, but over time it becomes a matter of investing in culture, putting some budget toward this, and slowly but surely you'll get there. Another thing I'll say is a lot of people try to do everything at once, where they research all the possible schemes, things that you can do, and they try to do all of it at once, and they do a bad job of all of it. So my advice to people in these divisions would be like, it just chunk it up into various pieces and implement it piece by piece.
Thank you very much. Tony, over to you.
Yeah, 100%. So I guess if we look at kind of employee benefits, we know that lots of benefits are offered to employees, but they're not promoted. And it's often offered in terms of, and it's just a box ticking exercise, right? And they don't actually drive any impact. And that's very true of payroll giving historically as well. So lots of people have a scheme, but none of their employees are ever told about it. And actually the way in which they can donate through payroll giving is really kind of archaic and not particularly user friendly, which is why we were kind of set up in the first place to try and address that. And I guess a big part of what we do, and again, just like every other business here, we're a completely free of charge like service to organizations that want to offer it, is we do a lot of like hands-on employee engagement as well, in terms of getting in front of employees, trying to inspire them to donate to charities, explaining how the scheme works, explaining that they can give to any charity of their choice, or they could potentially support a charity partnership. And we know that having that direct engagement and the direct promotional element massively increases take-up and the amount that's donated. So I think if businesses want to move past a kind of box-ticking exercise and actually properly drive impact, they 100% should be promoting the sustainable benefits that they offer.
Thank you very much. And Tom, what are your thoughts in relation to this question and the electric car scheme and what we're doing?
Sure, I'll give a slightly contrarian view to this. So should businesses support their employees? I think that's the right word, support. If you change that to compel, I would quite strongly disagree. So there's some good examples where businesses have engaged and put budget behind nice benefits, or from my perspective, nice benefits that encourage and compel people to choose certain behaviors. And they got quite a lot of pushback for being paternalistic and I guess a bit pushy, right, preachy. And the best example I know is Basecamp in the US. They make software, they pushed in all these benefits, put quite a lot of money towards it. They gave farmers market vouchers and education allowance, wellness allowance, and all this stuff. And I think, there was a decent proportion of their employees who said, hey, you're putting money towards this, I'd prefer the cash. I want to go and use the cash to buy a Five Guys burger instead of going to the farmer's market. Who are you to tell me to go to the farmer's market, kind of thing. And I think that's true. I don't think businesses is necessarily their place to say, we're going to put money for you to go and do something and preach a certain behavior. Now, I do think that's the government's job, but not businesses' job. And so where there's access to, where it's support and access to go and get a benefit that's available, and with respect to a car, it's like $5-6 grand a year of extra savings you can make if you go and get an EV like this. That's great, make it available. But I'd go to the point of making it available, educating people that it's available, as Tony said, But I would never say you should definitely get an electric car, because there's good reason why you might want to keep buying petrol until you have to. So that's kind of the nuance I'd put on it.
Thank you very much. All fantastic answers. Really appreciate that. So last question before we move to Q&A. So if anybody's attending the call and you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll come around to them. The last question we'd be proposing on the table: how do companies decide what benefits employees want? Tony, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, there's no simple answer to this, right? Because companies decide in different ways which benefits their employees want. I guess from our side, like when we speak to clients, a lot of businesses prioritize benefits that they actually have to pay for, because they have to demonstrate the return on investment of the benefits that they're paying for. Our approach is quite different, because we're trying to drive social change. We've tried to make it an entirely free, well, I mean, it is an entirely free service, right? And actually that means that it can fall down the priority list sometimes in terms of where the business focuses. The one thing I would say about this is that moving forward, I think it's really important for businesses to have a suite of kind of sustainability benefits that they can offer their employees. And to Tom's point, it's not compulsory, it's just available. And I think clearly there are lots of other benefits which are much more practical. There might be perks that are going to be much more in demand, and they're really essential to a business looking after their employees. But actually, I do feel the sustainable kind of suite of products should be a part of companies' benefits offering. And hopefully, I mean, we're certainly seeing that it's kind of moving in that direction as well.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And on the topic of sort of net zero benefits, Tom, what are your thoughts on this question?
Yeah. So in our business, we pick a couple of benefits each year, or two or three, to investigate. See, could we do this? Sometimes it's, do we have the budget to do this? Or sometimes it's just educating ourselves of what's available in the market. And we survey employees to say, which of the benefits do you value, and rank them, and which of the potential new benefits would you be most interested in, and a bit of an explainer. And that's always quite eye-opening. I can never quite predict the result, which is why I don't try and pick them myself, but would generally go with where the employees are most interested. And I guess you see the kind of obvious ones are ones that have a big financial benefit, and from a business perspective could potentially drive productivity benefits. So for instance, private healthcare, you can make an argument, okay, an NHS GP is difficult to access at the moment. Access to a private GP on a phone could be very beneficial to staff and could help productivity of the company. And those intersections are quite obvious. I think it's really interesting when employees get excited about other benefits that aren't necessarily aligned to financial or productivity. And really that's where I think one of your points was, this is becoming a must-have for employees to feel like they want to join a company or belong at a company that's they're aligned with the values of the company, to at least provide some of the access to more sustainable benefits.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Dino, over to you on this one.
I'll try to be quick, but I do like Tom's approach of sort of asking the employees. I think that's a really good way of approaching it. A lot of our customers are customers because their employees have said, hey, have you checked out CycleSaver? Could we please introduce this? It would be hugely beneficial for me. So, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience in sort of deciding what employee benefits to introduce across a range of benefits, but just a lot of our customers just come from the employees themselves. I know a lot of companies do surveys to do this. Just a warning about surveys is that I think a lot of people just send it out to the entire workforce and hope for enough responses. I would just say focus a lot on making sure you get responses from various groups of people within the workforce. Sometimes you get responses from your highly engaged segment that will read every single mail and respond to every single thing from your division. But there might be clusters of people that you're not hearing from. And if you are sending out these surveys, just make sure you get a really diverse range of views from various business divisions and people within the organization.
Amazing. Thank you everyone for your fantastic responses. I've been really enjoyed hearing your thoughts on these topics. We're going to open the floor now to a bit of a Q&A. So I can see a few questions have come in the chat already. So please, can I encourage everyone to put as many questions as you can in. We've got loads of time. I can answer the first one myself, perhaps, Rudy. You're looking at using the electric car scheme. That's fantastic. If you head to our website and click book a call, you'll be put through to a member of the team. We have a great question from Hayley Spare. So how do you deflect employees who believe promoting sustainable benefits is too woke and they feel the business is not focusing on the right things? And a follow-up from that, how do you avoid benefit comms being overwhelming with making them aware of the offering and encourage usage? So anyone want to volunteer to answer that to begin with, or should I pick somebody?
I'm happy to take it. I mean, I think it's what we've talked about in terms of offering it to people, but not like compelling them to do anything with it, right? It's all about personal choice and employee choice. The business is there to kind of present options, which the employees can then have complete personal choice in terms of which ones they go ahead with. And I guess when they do choose to kind of engage with a particular benefit, it's approaching that in a kind of very kind of soft way, not hard sell. It's just like, we're here to kind of offer this benefit to you and help you understand how to realize, how to do it in practice. But again, it's entirely up to you how you do it, when you do it, if you do it.
Thank you very much. Any thoughts, or Tom?
I can jump in on this. So yeah, I agree with the point. Make it available, explain it. Where woke and preachy kind of align to each other, obviously want to avoid that. And we often in the company, we talk about making obvious choices. So we define an obvious choice as something that's cheaper, better, faster, simpler, no-brainer choice, right? And not putting a premium on the sustainability factor. So just acts as a completely rational economic agent and just be like, is this a better or worse choice? Is it better? If it's better on every single aspect of the decision-making criteria, it's an obvious choice. And the nice thing about the product we put together, the electric car scheme, is because it opens up tens of thousands of pounds of savings, suddenly your choice becomes cheaper, gets to me quicker, it's going to be simpler to pay for, and you don't need to worry about the sustainability factor. Obviously, that's a big plus for some people and not really for other people. But if you can make what you're doing simpler, cheaper, and easier, then I think it's always going to be better. And there are some benefits that really tick that box.
Fantastic.
And just on the second part of that, on that question about comms and overwhelming people, I mean, it goes to an earlier point of just making sure you don't do everything all at once at the same time and just try to throw everything in one update. I mean, my advice is very much take it, benefit by benefit or initiative by initiative. But at the same time, I mean, if you are communicating one benefit, don't think that one communication is going to cut it. This is something that needs to be followed up quite a lot. And I think people are scared of overwhelming their employees about communications. But in my experience, you can never communicate some of the stuff enough. And every communication that goes out is just more and more people who read it, take to it. So I'm like, oh, this is great. I don't know that this is how it works. I should really take it up. So that would be my advice.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughts on that question. And thank you, Hayley. I see a really good question from Samit. So I'm part of a recruitment business. Can you share the possible benefits that are demanded by recruitment employees based on your experience? Tom, have you got any immediate thoughts on that?
Not really. I mean, I guess the spread of demand for benefits is, I would expect, is fairly common across industries, and the things that employees in general are interested in in the recruitment space is probably quite similar across the board, but open to other people's views on that.
We actually have a recruitment business on board that's based in London, and some employees have switched to, there's lots of meetings as a recruiter. Some of the employees have switched to Lime bikes as a means of transport instead of taking the tube, which is more sustainable, and the employees like it. It's often a lot quicker. So that's just, a side note that there are alternative forms of transport popping up, but it's very much dependent on where you are as a business and what your staff wants as well.
Amazing. Thank you very much for your responses to Simi's question. Anyone got any more questions? Feel free to put them in the chat. Otherwise, I can absolutely ask one to the panel. Any more for any more? Cool. I'll absolutely ask one. So I guess this is to everybody. What's been the biggest challenge your company has faced in promoting sustainable employee benefits, and how have you overcome it? And I guess looking ahead, what innovations or trends do you think will shape the future of sustainable benefits?
I'll take that one because it's such an easy answer from my perspective. Everyone assumes that there's one cycle to work scheme, or one, like, cycle to work is a thing they've joined, and once they've joined one scheme, that's it. And it's sort of a massive piece of work to communicate that most of the schemes right now focus on buying a bike, and that's cool. There's a market for that. But now a lot more employees want bike share as an option, and there's very much a need for two cycle to work schemes, CycleSaver and your traditional provider. I mean, that is by far our biggest challenge, and it continues to be a challenge.
Tom, any thoughts?
Oh, what's the biggest? I know the biggest reason that we talk to people who don't end up taking up the scheme is just inertia. It's difficult for a benefit to become top of the list of to-dos in any business. We spend, I guess, a lot of time trying to make it click to go, one click type offering, with things like employee communication taken care of, all the admin one click away, just to make sure that businesses aren't scared off, or that they can implement it alongside another change program that they're doing. That's probably number one, just making it easy enough to become the top of the list for a team to take on.
I think from our side, the first thing is there's a general lack of awareness about payroll giving. And yeah, that's hence, less than, well, I think 4% of businesses offer it nationwide. The second problem is kind of a legacy issue, in that the businesses that have run programs have been running them in a very archaic way, which is really clunky and admin heavy, which, has held back progress. So, I mean, I don't want to go into the detail of it here, but we've tried to take all of the friction out of the process and make it as simple and straightforward as possible. Become like a turnkey solution for payroll giving for the first time in the UK. So yeah, those in specific regard to payroll giving, I'd say those are the two main things. But yeah, certainly to echo Tom's point about inertia as well, and getting it up the priority list, that is just an ongoing challenge for many benefits, I think.
Yeah, I mean, also, say on my side, that's reason number 2 is inertia. And you can make it as simple as a 2-click registration process, but even then, to get the person to actually, make the click or two, and also get approvals from any managers, etc. I mean, these things take time.
Amazing. Thank you very much, everyone. Can't see any more questions in the chat, but perhaps I can ask one more from my side to the panel. So sustainability is often referenced as a long-term goal. How can businesses provide practical benefits for employees now, whilst working towards bigger environmental goals for the future? Any immediate thoughts on that?
I'll give you some thoughts. From my background, I was head of product at Vitality, which is well known for its behavior change program. As you know, and so it's a little bit of a roundabout answer, but with health and wellness, often with exercise, you only receive the benefits quite far down the line, right? But you need to sort of do the exercise immediately. And I see the same effects in the sustainability space, where my view would be like, you can plan for the long term, but what you really want is behavior change in the short term, and the best way to do that is short-term incentives, like a salary sacrifice scheme, to get people to make changes, do action on immediate, and then that will sort of accumulate over time to this massive change in the long term. So I think there are some parallels between the two, and so I think you can plan for long term, but you got to make things urgent as well. I hope that answers the question.
Great answer. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think from our side, it's kind of down to individual choice, right? So through our platform, you can donate to any charity in the UK, and you can donate to kind of environmental charities where perhaps the impact that they have is much more medium to long term in terms of the campaigning work they do. But you can also donate to any charity where they can have an immediate impact with the money you spend, in terms of, I don't know, buying vaccines, or providing blankets for refugees, or, building a well in Africa. And ultimately, that's something that is really tangible that you can see within, at the point where you decide to donate to a charity, or you can choose to kind of, in the more environmental space, to have a longer term impact as well. So yeah, that would be my perspective.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think you've got to look for things that will have a short-term wins and long-term impact. If you just invest on the stuff that's really long-term, then you don't get enough momentum. And equally, if you just invest in stuff that's short-term, then you don't see enough true change. I quite like the short-term wins that we see in companies that use the electric car scheme. So you get kind of obvious big financial savings for anyone who engages in it. It's effectively getting a £7,000 pay rise per year from your company for free. So obviously people are absolutely delighted by that. They've made a really short-term decision. I was going to get a petrol car. No, now I'm going to get the EV that I was considering. That EV turns up in the car park. People are buzzed by that. Customers come into your car park. It looks better. You go off to your clients. It looks better. Looks like you're representing your business who might have general sustainable goals. And then obviously over time, we expect to have quite a big impact by engaging a broader set of the workforce. But that's going to take years because people come up for their deciding to change their car every few years. And equally, you'll have projects across the portfolio of things that impact sustainability that will just take a long time, whether they're benefits-based or business-based. But it's nice to see some short-term wins and momentum, and your staff will feel it. And I think it pays back and keeps paying.
Brilliant. All fantastic responses. Thank you so much. I think unless there's any other questions from our attendees, perhaps we can wrap things up there. Any